Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. On this week's episode, I get surrounded. Let's get started. Many of my listeners may be aware of the Surrounded series. This is a series produced for YouTube by a production company called Jubilee, and the Surrounded idea is that they get 20 of, let's say, one side of an argument, who usually will debate a well-known or famous person on the other side of the argument. And this is why it's called Surrounded, one person versus 20. I'm sure these have popped up on your feed once or twice if you watch YouTube. But there's one that popped up on my feed that I was very interested to watch. Unfortunately, as I watched it a few minutes in, I was absolutely appalled at this episode. I nearly turned it off multiple times, and it made me infuriated. This video, called Debating Resistance, 20 Protesters versus 1 Palestinian, featuring Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib. For those of you who don't know Ahmed Alkhatib, he is a Gazan, born and raised in Gaza, who now lives in the West. And he has made somewhat of a recent career out of speaking his mind, speaking his truth, and going against the fake Hamas Gaza narrative. So he was set to be surrounded by 20 pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel activists in order to have a debate. On the one hand, you have Al-Khatib, who himself is very pro-peace, two-state solution, Israel is not the bad guy, or at least not always the bad guy. And then these protesters who, for lack of a better term, are essentially anti-Israel trolls, protesters, people who are pretty uneducated on the topic other than through TikTok University. So for me, when I started watching this, I thought, of course, he's going to wipe the floor with these people because he has the lived experience and he knows his facts. But I'll be honest, the reason why it was so painful to watch is that this poor man is definitely not a debater in any way. He clearly doesn't have the abilities to shut down opposing arguments. He simply allows them to spread their lies, despite them being completely factually untrue. And he did a very poor job. Now, I don't think it's his fault he did a poor job. He's just not really accustomed to this type of argument, we'll call it. So this episode, what I wanted to do was try and fill the place of Mr. Khatib, not to put words in his mouth, but to say the things that he should have said, or maybe could have said had he maybe had a little bit more talent in the debate field. I genuinely felt bad for this poor guy. He's trying to spread his pro-peace, anti-Hamas, let's all get along message, which was countered by essentially pro-Hamas bullshit from a bunch of Western useful idiots. So what I would like to do is I'd like to play for you the clips as best I can and try and debunk some of these claims or say what I would have done in this situation, being someone who is maybe a little bit better at debating with facts and information. One disadvantage that I will acknowledge is the fact that this gentleman has family still in Gaza. This man obviously has to be concerned with what goes out into the world, that if Hamas sees it, his family could be put at risk. So he might have to filter his answers a lot more than I would, because I don't have to be concerned with that kind of thing. And that's one thing that these anti-Israel protesters always like to ignore. The fact that anybody who even tries to speak out against Hamas is putting huge risk on their family and friends, which is why you usually don't get people like Mr. Al-Khatib. I apologize if this episode is a little bit longer than usual. There are a lot of things to go over in this, so bear with me. Hopefully you enjoy, and hopefully it's not too bad to hear some of these disgusting anti-Israel facts being spewed by Western useful idiots. So let's get into the video. In these videos, the main speaker, Mr. Al-Khatib in this case, will come up with a claim, and then people will try to refute that claim. So first you're going to hear Mr. Al-Khatib's claim, and then you are going to hear the responses from various useful idiots.
My name is Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib. I'm a Palestinian American who grew up in Gaza, where I lost immediate and extended family members in the war. Since October 7th, I've been on a mission to delegitimize Hamas and promote a pragmatic pathway forward away from violence and toward peace and coexistence. And I am surrounded by 20 pro-Palestine protesters. My first claim is that October 7th was an abhorrent disaster that unleashed the worst catastrophe in the Palestinian people's history.
Worst catastrophe. I think that you're using specific words for specific reasons. The Nakba, catastrophe, right? I want to offer my condolences. I believe that 33 members of your family were exterminated by the Zionist entity. So my question is, how is this worse than what initiated everything, which was the Nakba in 1948?
It's interesting here that the man who's asking the question of the Gazan person suggests that he's using this term catastrophe to reference the Nakba on purpose, which is true. That's exactly what the gentleman was doing. Now, one thing that you may not know is the term Nakba was actually created by a guy in Syria named Konstantin Zuriak, who described the Nakba as the mistake and the catastrophe of the Arab armies telling all of the Arabs in the land to leave in order for them to destroy the state of Israel and for them to come back. This was the catastrophe. It wasn't until the 1960s that Yasser Arafat and some of the, quote, Palestinians who invented the Palestinian identity started trying to change that narrative from it being a mistake and a problem caused by the Arabs and turn it to blame on Israel, which was obviously their main goal. In fact, the Syrian prime minister at the time was very clearly saying that we were the cause of this. We caused the people to be kicked out of their houses and lose their livelihood because we decided to go to war. There was no doubt about this back until the 1960s when it was changed. So the claim that this pro-Palestinian activist is making, suggesting that he's using the Nakba for a reason, is true. The reason being that the Nakba wasn't actually even a Nakba, not the way they call it today. So the issues in Gaza today are way worse than they were during the supposed Nakba. The irony that is lost on these people is the fact that there's no difference between the Arabs starting a war in 1948, causing people to lose their land and livelihood, and indeed some people their lives, compared to today, where in Gaza right now, Hamas, another Arab group, decided to start a war, causing people to be displaced, lose their lives, and lose their livelihoods. This is the exact same problem, and yet, ironically, they don't even notice. So I do think Mr. Alkhatib is right in the fact that he's claiming things are way worse today than they were in 1948, because this is a choice that Hamas made. Unlike in 1948, when the Arab world decided to force this upon the supposed Palestinian Arabs.
Between 1948 and 1967.
Is it incorrect that the British
who was in charge
region?
Between 1948
is
and 1967? Is that incorrect?
You haven't answered a single one of my questions. I asked who put your parents in Gaza, and you were unwilling to answer that. Can you at least answer me that? Who put your parents in Gaza?
Between 1948 and 67 and 1967.
You've dodged every one of my questions.
It's not dodging so much.
So just it's a very simple question. Who put your parents in a refugee camp?
I'll answer this one. Here, you can hear the Western useful idiot trying to grill and catch the Gazan person as if he knows more than the Gazan person. It's kind of ironic. He's laughing at, how dare you avoid my question. This is where I feel like Al-Khatib is a little bit shady, trying not to go against the Palestinian party line, which is a little bit of a shame and it makes it more difficult for him. But I'll answer this one for you. Following the 1948 war, that the Arabs kicked the other Arabs out of the country, they put them in refugee camps. The Arabs. That's where the refugee camps are still to this day. The refugee camps that are in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan and even in the West Bank and Gaza. Areas that are currently controlled by supposed Palestinians have Palestinian refugee camps that people are not allowed to leave. We've gone into that before on our podcast. So when this cocky Western useful idiot tries to say who put your family there, the answer is the Egyptians put his family in camps in Egypt, which is now known as Gaza. I'm not sure why Al-Khatib is having a little bit of a difficulty with this very clear historical answer. Maybe because it goes against the Palestinian Arab bullshit lie that they were in the land before and that the Jews kicked them out and it wasn't the Arabs who then put them into camps. This was a funny attempt by this Western useful idiot to try and have a gotcha against the Gazan, even though he actually doesn't know the answer himself. He's clearly wrong, but he still tries to play like he knows what he's talking about. And slightly later on, Al-Khatib actually admits this. So I'm going to play a little bit of his answer because this is actually the one time I think he did a really good job. But unfortunately, the Western useful idiot really didn't care. What does he know? He only comes from Gaza and is a Palestinian Arab. But you're a useful Western idiot, so you know better.
We should ask the Arab armies that came to liberate the Palestinian people.
Why didn't they defeat the Zionists?
And ended up facilitating part of the Nakba by asking folks, my mom...
So you're blaming the Nakba on the Arab countries?
I'm blaming the failures of the Arabs and of the Palestinian leadership at the time in acting in the best interest of the Palestinian people and then looking at 1948 to 1967. Why wasn't a Palestinian state established? Why wasn't it until 1964 that at the Arab League summit that the decision was made to create the Palestinian Liberation Organization and to push for Palestinian statehood? Why was Jordan allowed to annex the West Bank and Egypt annex the Gaza Strip?
To be very clear, I'm against that, but that's a regional conflict, right?
Now, here you can hear Al-Khatib is not doing a great job. His voice is very cracked and slow, and he's really struggling to make his point, even though all of that was correct. If I could help Al-Khatib out a little bit here, which he clearly cannot answer because he sort of goes along with the fake Palestinian narrative, the reason those countries didn't create a Palestine is because at the time, the Arabs who lived in Palestine didn't see themselves as Palestinians. They wanted to be Arabs. To the 1937 British Peel Commission, they called themselves Syrians. They had no interest in their own state, which is why Jordan and Egypt didn't create one. They didn't want one. But one really funny thing that I love to hear from this Western useful idiot is how apparently he is absolutely against the Jordanians and the Egyptians not creating a state. But that's not a problem like Israel and Palestine. That's a regional issue. You notice how he claims to not support what the Arabs are doing, but justifies it? That's a regional problem. That's not a religious problem or some type of European colonization problem. So apparently, according to this gentleman, it's no big deal that the Arabs stole the land. And for the record, the plan was if the Jewish state was destroyed by the Arab armies, they had made a map and made sure to cut up all of the land of British Palestine into their own countries. Everybody got a piece, except for the quote-unquote Palestinians. Nothing was going to go to them, and the entire land was going to be a mix of Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. This is the supposed Palestinian state they apparently were going to go create, but never did. And I have a feeling that Al-Khatib knows this, which is why he has to act a little bit shady, because there was never an intention on making a Palestinian state, because there was no Palestinian people until the 1960s. For the next speaker, it's a young lady. I'm going to skip her whole preamble where she goes on citing a whole bunch of completely debunked claims, starvation, genocide, blah, 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 murdering of people. It literally was a soliloquy in complete BS. But let's get to the end of her question. Remember, the claim is that October 7th was the worst thing to happen to the Palestinian Arab people in history.
For the first time, it's not just on the news. It's on your phone. We're watching a genocide take place on our phones, and most everybody is talking about it. So how can you say that October 7th was so detrimental to the Palestinians when it is the first time that it has been brought to heightened media attention?
So what this young lady's claim is that this is only different after October 7th because of social media. Social media has made it available to everybody to understand what apparently has been going on for 70 years, the genocide of these people. Unfortunately for her, let's be honest, the PR has been going on a lot longer than social media. Social media has just amplified it because so much misinformation can go out there. And Hamas has really found a way to harness social media. They have been able to put out so many fake Gazawood, Pollywood bullshit that they are able to control millions of people. It is literally a masterclass in propaganda and brainwashing. But being on social media or being more obvious to the world, even if it is fake, doesn't change the reality that it is not a genocide, that people are not being starved, as she claimed in a clip you didn't hear. The fact is that things on the ground are completely opposite. So it's almost counter to your point that social media has somehow shown you the truth, because in reality, social media is showing you a lie. As of the recording of this episode, 60 million weekly packages of aid has gone into Gaza for Gazan residents. So starvation, cross that one off the list. Genocide, the ICJ has seen that there's no genocide. The ICC did not charge genocide. And even Amnesty International, who claims there is a genocide, put a little caveat in their report that technically it's not really genocide. We had to change the description of what a genocide was, and then by that definition, it's a genocide. A population graph of the Palestinian Arabs in Gaza, West Bank, and even in Israel proper will show you that a genocide and ethnic cleansing is literally not happening over the last 70 years. There is no genocide. Just because you see bad things in war now due to social media doesn't make it a genocide. Can you imagine if during World War II, everybody had a cell phone? Can you imagine the bombing of Dresden and all of the innocent people that were killed there would somehow justify that the Nazis weren't so bad, and that because a lot of people died and it looked pretty bad on social media, that apparently the Nazis were right after all? So her claim is pretty much just based on emotion. It's ridiculous. And for her to tell a guy who lost all of his family in Gaza that it's a genocide and he disagrees, who are you to tell him that? And he lays it out pretty clear. So here's a clip of him and her arguing where she essentially tells him, you're wrong.
That sounds really awful, what I just heard you say. You're saying that you want to see images of dead Palestinians. You want to see...
No one wants to see those images. But if that's what it takes to get people to recognize what's actually going on instead of another Middle Eastern war, then that's what it takes. It's tragic that that's what it took.
Do you recognize that Hamas, in official communiques, has and publicly and overtly has made it clear that part of their strategy relies on causing maximum death and destruction in Gaza, so that the ensuing
in response to Netanyahu blatantly saying that his goal is ethnic cleansing.
May I just finish this point, please? That Hamas wants to generate maximum death and destruction on the ground in Gaza in hopes that the ensuing imagery can actually rile up the international community, rile up folks in the Western diaspora on college campuses, so that then this could delegitimize Israel, so that this could stop the war. I'm talking about facts on the ground, as somebody who has so much attachment to the reality of Gaza on a daily basis.
Did you catch that? When she interrupted him twice, once to blame Netanyahu, when this gentleman who lives in Gaza is saying it's Hamas's fault, Hamas is to blame, and her response is simply, no, you're wrong, it's Israel's fault. And then she interrupts him again to say, oh, is that what they told you? Implying what? That he takes talking points from someone else? This is a Western, useful idiot telling a person from Gaza what to think and what to say. This is the exact example of what the problem is in the pro-Palestine movement. They are delegitimizing Gazan voices, telling them they're wrong because they know better from TikTok. And she even admitted that all of her information comes from social media.
What makes Hamas's argument for armed resistance is the fact that in the West Bank, where the PA operates as basically an administrative state for the Israeli government and actually goes insofar as to protect settlers, what that actually does is it functions as to make the case for Hamas to have instances of armed resistance. For the last you brought up why we haven't had like a Palestinian state. For the last 2 decades, Israel hasn't even been interested in that. And that's even to say that they were, for example, interested in within the Oslo period, which I don't think was actually the case.
Now, this isn't his entire argument. He had a whole preamble with the typical ethnic cleansing BS that they always talk about. But it's interesting the one point he makes here, which is that Israel is not interested in peace, despite the fact that Israel has been the only side interested in peace, because every time in the past, including the 2000s, when the Palestinian Authority was offered 98% of what they were asking for, and they rejected it. So for anybody to claim that Israel is the barrier for peace, and Israel didn't want peace, including specifically the Oslo Accords that Israel agreed to, that created the 3 zones and the Palestinian Authority that is there today, claiming Israel didn't want to do that, but I guess did it anyway, is just ridiculous on its face. So using the Palestinian Authority's rejection of peace as a justification for why Hamas needs to create terror is pretty stupid if you think about it. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority had every opportunity when they were given Gaza in 2005 to turn it into whatever they wanted to turn it into. Unfortunately, as is the case in most Arab countries, they fought each other for power. They had a civil war, which forced the Palestinian Authority to flee to the West Bank and Hamas to be stuck in Gaza. And then they turned Gaza into a base for terror. So that is their choice and has nothing to do with the Palestinian Authority or Israel, a point that Alkhatib makes right here.
The fact on the ground remains that 50,000 Palestinians would still be alive had Hamas made a different choice, but had they simply kept their fighters at home on October 7th. I recognize the imbalance of power dynamics between Palestinians and Israelis, but with clearly the Israelis, if I may finish this point,
Sure.
Within said imbalance, there exists plenty of room for Palestinian agency and accountability and responsibility, such that October 7th was a choice. It was not an inevitability.
You can hear the useful idiot trying to interrupt, because God forbid this guy gets to spread facts and truth. He needs to be interrupted with talking points. Here you go with yet another time that this useful idiot makes a very stupid claim, blaming Israel for everything, not Hamas.
Hamas served our people, the defenseless Palestinian people, on a silver platter to the most far-right government in Israel's history. What did you expect would happen?
Actually, Israel served that. They did everything they could to undermine Fatah and support groups like Hamas.
You have a Gazan who lived there being told by a Western useful idiot that what he thinks and knows and believes and lived is wrong, and that this useful idiot knows more, apparently. What this Western useful idiot thinks he knows is the fake talking point that Netanyahu and his government, quote, supported Hamas. They paid for Hamas, which is completely factually untrue. The reality was that under the Netanyahu government, he recognized that trying to suffocate and end Hamas through not paying anything to Gaza, not helping Gaza in any way, keeping it entirely sealed off, hasn't worked in getting rid of Hamas or turning the people against them. So the next opportunity that he had, he thought, maybe I'm going to try more of a Palestinian Authority model, which is by working with them, supporting them, allowing people from Gaza to work in Israel to bring money back into Gaza to help the economy. Maybe it's possible that they will be less interested in war. When you have a nice life, a nice house, your family's doing pretty well, you will actually be less likely to want to destroy that to get back at Israel for some made-up idea. The problem with that is that the money and stuff that Israel was putting into Gaza was going to Hamas. So therefore, the people weren't having a better life under Hamas because Hamas would steal it all. It is just unbelievable and so infuriating to hear a Gazan explaining what his life was like in Gaza and who is to blame for that life, and a Western useful idiot always turning it on Israel with their talking points, ones that are debunked. But just wait. The next person who comes up to plate is even worse. Take a listen to this.
Okay, so I think you use language very loosely. We said genocide and we said colonization and you said taking over. You say so many things to diminish the words and the language. You use your personal experience, which is horrible, and your terms is abhorrent. You should never have to deal with that. But to place the onus on Hamas is so despicable, because the reason that Hamas is there, you just said, was propped up by Israel. Why were they propped up? Because they wanted to take out the PLO. Why did they want to take out the PLO? Because they were actually going to create some dissonance with Israel.
Did you catch that? This person decided to call a Gazan person explaining his feelings on the situation as despicable. The irony before calling it despicable is the fact that he said, this is based on your feelings and your terrible treatment, and how dare you blame Hamas for it? Again, this is not a Gazan person having a debate with another Gazan person. This is a Gazan person being told by a Western useful idiot who they should be blaming for the issues that are going on in Gaza right now. I cannot stress this enough, that this is the typical Western bullshit that they are pushing, that they are telling Gazans what to think and how to feel. This just makes my blood boil, because isn't that whole leftist idea is listening to the indigenous people, assuming you believe that the Arabs are indigenous, which they're not. Why are you not listening to the person who is telling you who's the problem? You, as a Western useful idiot, are telling them, well, actually, that's despicable. You should stop saying that because I say it's the opposite. This is the perfect example of what's going on in the world today. And ironically, he calls them out for this later. He says that these Western useful idiots are the problem. They are hijacking the issues in Gaza for their own anti-Israel needs.
With all due respect to some other allies that suck up the oxygen out of the room, that feel the need to speak over Palestinians, that act in a very disrespectful manner.
If I could only show you the faces that these Western useful idiots made to this comment, it was priceless. Jaws on the floor at being called out for their own hypocrisy.
And you want to delegitimize Hamas, but that makes no sense to me. We use the term terrorist. Terrorist now makes it so Hamas can't even plead for help, because if you're labeled a terrorist, you can't go to the UN, you can't go to this and that. And let me tell you one thing. This one thing I'll say is one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
All right.
So that was the end of question 1, believe it or not. So I might not get through all questions today. Maybe I'll do another episode with question number 2 and 3 and so on. But you can hear here, as this last person is trying to make the case that Hamas is just an innocent victim in all of this. They can't even go for help. Hamas gets billions of dollars every year from Qatar, from UNRWA, from all of the organizations that send money into Gaza. There is a reason why their leadership, before most of them are now dead, were billionaires stealing that aid. So save me this idea that the poor Hamas members couldn't get anything because they're listed as terrorists. They are very open about what they want to do. They are very clear, but you can hear in the Western useful idiots how they are trying so desperately to change the narrative, to pretend that Hamas are just innocent Palestinians. It's not their fault. They can't control this stuff. This is all Israel's fault, and they just want help. In the end, I know I haven't been able to get through this entire hour-long debate. Maybe we'll get through it in parts, so this might be just part 1. But even from this one question, you can see, and it is so horrible to watch, how the Western useful idiots are actually telling a Gazan person that they are wrong, that what they've lived is wrong, how they feel is wrong, and what they want for the future is wrong. And how you as a Western useful idiot can decide what the Gazan people need is actually the problem here. The problem is that the Western people overseas, whether it's government or idiots that are in college, have decided to tell the Gazans what they need and what they should do. And the problem is, due to the social media, like you heard in one of those people's answers, some of the lies that they're sharing, they believe that keeping Hamas in power is apparently a great thing. Let's not only keep them in power, let's legitimize them. Let's call them equals and let's let them go to the UN and ask for money. The people who in their charter say they want to kill all Jews, and whose leadership says we will sacrifice every last one of the Gazan people for our cause to kill the Jews. These are the people that they are legitimizing. Of course, they don't see this on their siloed TikTok feeds or Instagram feeds. And you can see the cognitive dissonance when they speak to a Gazan who tells them they're wrong, and they can't handle it. They simply say, no, you're wrong, I'm right because my Instagram tells me so. You can hear in the way that they are speaking to a Gazan how much disdain they have for that person, how much they think he's wrong. The funny thing is, I don't recall anyone calling him a traitor. I'm not surprised if they would, but I don't recall in the entire hour-long debate if they ever called him that. But I'm sure they're feeling it. How can you sit here and tell a Gazan person that they're wrong because you wish they were wrong? Because the people you see on fake Instagram stories, they're saying the opposite. And in fact, later on in the debate, Al-Khatib actually speaks with a fellow Palestinian at the table, that he thought that everybody around them was actually doing more harm than good. Of course, the person he was speaking to disagreed. But they pointed out the fact that it's important for Gazan people to have these debates on who's best for them to lead, what the future holds for their people, not Western useful idiots. Hopefully soon I'll have a second version of this episode for question number 2, or maybe some other highlights. It is a very long video, so if you do want to go online and watch it, I warn you, it is tragic to listen to. If you believe in Gazan people having their own voice, that is. It is sad that this one poor man who is definitely not ready for a debate with Western useful idiots, trained in TikTok University, this poor guy just couldn't keep up. He was literally just surrounded by useful idiots. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast and check out some of our other episodes on your favorite podcast source. We'll see you next time.